Hello my friends, welcome back. We are going to keep reading The Thief Lord together. So the last time we read, we had just started the book, so we got to know Prosper and Beau, who have run away from home to start a new life together in Venice. They're two brothers and they're living in an abandoned movie theater. So we're picking back up at chapter 3, The Star Palace. A water rat scuttled away as the children felt their way along the narrow passage. It led to a canal, like so many of Venice's alleys and passages. Hornet, Prosper, and Beau, however, only followed it as far as a metal door set in the windowless wall to their right. Someone had painted Vietato Ingresso in clumsy letters on it. No entry. The door had once been one of the movie theater's emergency exits. Now it was the entrance to a hiding place that only 6 children knew anything about. Next to the door was a cord, and Prosper gave it 2 strong tugs. He waited for a moment and then pulled it once more. This was their sign, but it still took quite a while before something happened. Beau hopped impatiently from one foot to the other. Finally, the door opened just a crack, and a suspicious voice asked, "Password?" "Come on, Riccio, you know we never remember the stupid password," Prosper grumbled angrily. Hornet stepped up to the door and hissed, "Do you see these bags in my hands, hedgehog? I just dragged them all the way from the Rialto market. My arms are as long as a monkey's, so open the door." Riccio opened the door, looking very worried. Okay, but only if Prosper doesn't tell Scipio again, like last time." Riccio was a scrawny boy, and at least a head shorter than Prosper, although he wasn't much younger than him. At least, that's what he claimed. His brown hair always stuck out from his head in every direction, earning the nickname Riccio the Hedgehog. "No one can remember Scipio's passwords," Hornet muttered as she pushed past him, "and anyway, the special ring is enough." "Scipio doesn't think so." Riccio carefully pushed the bolt across the door. "Well, then he should make up passwords we can remember. Can you remember the last one?" Riccio scratched his spiky head. "Hold on. Catago, diddle-do, east, or something like that." Hornet rolled her eyes. Beau giggled. Riccio walked ahead, shining the way with his flashlight. "We've already started cleaning up," he said, "but we haven't got far. Mosca just wants to fiddle with his radio all the time. And until an hour ago, we were standing in front of the Palazzo Pisani. I don't know why Scipio had to pick such a palace of all places for his next raid. There's something going on in there nearly every night. Parties, receptions, dinners, all the wealthy families of Venice seem to be in and out all the time. Beats me how Scipio thinks he can get in there." Prosper shrugged. So far, the Thief Lord hadn't asked him and Beau to stake out one of his targets, although Beau kept begging him to. It was usually Riccio and Mosca who were sent to check out the houses Scipio planned to visit at night. Scipio had a name for the two of them. He called them his eyes. Hornet's task was to make sure that the money from his raids was not spent too quickly. Prosper and Beau, as the Thief Lord's most recent charges, had so far only been allowed to tag along when the loot was sold, or, like today, to do some shopping. Prosper didn't mind that at all. Beau, however, would have loved to sneak with Scipio into the city's most elegant houses to steal all the amazing things the Thief Lord always brought back from his raids. "Scipio can get into any house," Beau said, skipping along next to Riccio. 2 hops on his right leg, 2 on the left. Beau never just walked. He ran or he bounced. "He raided the Doge's palace and wasn't caught. He is the Thief Lord." "Oh yes, the raid at the Doge's palace. How could we ever forget?" Hornet grinned at Prosper. "Even you must have heard that story 100 times by now." Prosper had to smile back. "Well, I could hear it 1,000 times, Riccio said, pushing aside a dark and musty curtain. Ahead of them lay the movie theater's auditorium. It hadn't been open to the public for some time. It was not very old, but it was in a much worse condition than some of the city's houses that had stood for hundreds of years. Dusty wire cables stuck out from the ceiling where there had once been large chandeliers. The children had strung a few naked light bulbs running on batteries throughout the large room, and even in their dim light you could still see plaster coming off the ceiling. Only the front 3 rows of seats remained, and each of those was missing a few chairs. Mice had built their nests in the soft red upholstery. The movie theater's screen was hidden behind a thick curtain embroidered with golden stars. The curtain was moth-eaten, but it had kept its old splendor. The golden thread on the pale blue fabric still shimmered full of promise, and Beau had to touch the golden stars at least once every day. Sitting on the bare floor in front of the curtain was a boy. He was fiddling with an old radio, and was so engrossed in his work he didn't notice Beau creeping up on him. Beau jumped onto his back, and the boy spun around. "Darn it, Beau," he shouted. "I nearly stabbed myself with a screwdriver." But Beau skipped away. Laughing, he climbed like a squirrel over the folding seats. "Just you wait, you little water rat," Mosca roared, trying to catch Beau. "This time I'm going to tickle you until you burst." Beau screamed, "Prop, help me!" But Prosper just stood there, grinning. He didn't lift a finger, not even when Mosca tucked his little brother under his arm like a parcel. Mosca was the biggest and strongest of them all, And however much Bo kicked and struggled, Mosca wouldn't let go. Unimpressed by his wriggling, Mosca carried his prisoner over to the others. "What do you think? Should I tickle him, or should I keep him prisoner here forever under my arm?" Bo screamed, "Let me go, Mosca!" Mosca's skin was beautifully black. Riccio always claimed he could hide like a shadow in the dark alleyways of the city. "All right, I'll pardon you this time, dwarf," Mosca said grandly while Bo tried more and more desperately to free himself. Then he asked, "So did you bring the paint for my boat?" "No, it's too expensive. We'll buy it when Scipio brings us the new loot," Hornet answered. She dumped the bags on a chair. "We can't afford it at the moment." "But we've got enough emergency cash." Mosca put Bo back on his feet and crossed his arms angrily. "What are you going to do with all that money?" "How often do I have to tell you? The money is for bad times." Hornet pulled Bo to her side. "Do you think you can manage to put the things in the fridge?" Bo nodded and dashed off, nearly falling flat on his face. He dragged the bags one by one to the double doors that used to open to let in the audience. Beyond the doors in the entrance hall was a large display cabinet that once held drinks and ice cream. Although it didn't work anymore, it was still useful for storing supplies. While Bo carried away the heavy bags, Mosca kneeled down in front of his radio again. "Too expensive," he grumbled. "My boat will rot away soon if I don't paint it. But you guys don't care because you're just a bunch of landlubbers. There's always enough money for Hornet's books." Hornet didn't answer that. Silently, she began to collect paper and other trash from the floor, while Prosper swept up the mouse droppings. Hornet really did have a lot of books. She'd even bought some of them, but mostly they were cheap paperbacks that had been thrown away by tourists. Hornet fished them out of trash cans and waste paper baskets, or she found them under the seats of Vaporetto boats or at the train station. You could hardly see her mattress behind the stacks of books. They all had their beds close together at the back of the movie theater. At night, after they had switched off the lights and blown out the last candle, the large windowless auditorium would be flooded with such complete darkness that it made them feel as tiny as ants and very lost. But the sounds of one another's breathing made them all feel a little safer. Riccio's mattress was covered with old comic books, and his sleeping bag was stuffed with so many stuffed animals there was hardly any space left for him. Mosca's bed could easily be spotted by his toolbox and fishing rods, which he liked to sleep next to. Tucked under the pillow was Mosca's greatest treasure, his lucky charm. This was a brass seahorse, exactly like the ones that adorned most gondolas in the city. Mosca swore he hadn't stolen it from a gondola, but had instead fished it from the canal behind the movie theater. A stolen lucky charm, he always claimed, brings only bad luck. Everyone knows that. Bo and Prosper huddled together every night on a single mattress. Bo's collection of plastic fans was lined up neatly at the top end. There were 6 of them, all in pretty good shape, but Bo's favorite was still the one Prosper had found at the station the day they arrived. The Thief Lord never slept with his followers in the Star Palace. No one knew where Scipio spent the nights, and he never spoke about it, although every now and then he would drop a mysterious hint about an abandoned church. Riccio had tried to follow him once, but he had been spotted immediately by Scipio, who had gotten so angry that afterward none of them even dared to watch him when he left. Their leader came and went as he pleased, and they had gotten used to it. He sometimes turned up 3 days in a row, and then they wouldn't see him again for nearly a week. But he did want to come that day, and when the Thief Lord announced a visit, he always came. But you could never be sure exactly when Scipio would appear. As Riccio's clock showed almost 11, and Bo was nearly asleep on Prosper's lap, they crept under their blankets, and Hornet began to read to them. She usually read to make them sleepy, to drive away their fear of the dreams that were waiting for them in the dark. That night, however, Hornet read to keep them awake until Scipio's arrival. She selected the most thrilling story from her pile of books, while the others lit the candles that stood in empty bottles and jars among the mattresses. Riccio placed 5 brand new candles in their only real candlestick. They were long and slender and made from pale wax. "Riccio," Hornet asked when they were all lying around her, waiting for their story, "where did you get the candles?" Riccio self-consciously hid his face behind his soft toys. "From the Salute Church," he mumbled. "There are hundreds, probably thousands lying around there, so it doesn't really matter if I take a few every now and then. Why should we spend our precious money on candles? I swear," he grinned at Hornet, "I always blow the Virgin Mary a kiss for each one." Hornet buried her face in her hands and sighed. "Oh, go on, start reading," Mosca said impatiently. No carabinieri will ever arrest Riccio for stealing a few candles, would they?" "They could," mumbled Bo. He yawned and curled up next to Prosper, who was struggling with a needle and thread over the holes in his brother's pants. "Because Riccio's guardian angel won't look after him if he steals things from a church. He's not allowed to." "Pah, trash. Guardian angel." Riccio made a contemptuous face, although he did sound a little worried. Hornet read for nearly an hour, while the night outside grew darker, and all those who had filled the city with noise during the day were long in their beds. Finally, the book slipped from her fingers, and her eyelids drooped. When Scipio finally arrived, they were all fast asleep. Chapter 4. The Thief Lord. Prosper wasn't sure what had woken him. Riccio mumbling in his sleep, or Scipio's quiet steps. As he started from his sleep, a slender figure emerged from the dark. Under the black mask that hid Scipio's eyes, Prosper could make out his pale chin. The mask's long, crooked nose gave him an eerie, bird-like appearance. Similar masks had once been worn by the doctors of Venice at the time when the Black Death had raged through the city more than 300 years ago. The birds of death, people called them. Smiling, the thief lord pulled the creepy thing from his face. Hi, Prop. Scipio let the light of his flashlight wander over the other sleeping faces. Sorry it got so late. Prosper pushed Beau's arm carefully from his chest and sat up. One day you're going to scare someone to death with that mask, he said quietly. How did you sneak in here? We bolted everything really well this time. Scipio shrugged. He ran his slender fingers through his long, raven black hair, which he usually wore in a ponytail. You should know by now that I can get into any place I want to. Scipio the Thief Lord. He liked to act grown up, although he was not much older than Prosper, and a good bit smaller than Mosca, even in his high-heeled boots. These were much too big for him, but he always kept them well polished. They were black leather, as black as the strange, long coat that reached down to his knees. He never went anywhere without them. Wake the others, Scipio commanded in his bossy, condescending voice, which Hornet hated so much. Prosper ignored him. Well, you've woken me already, Mosca grumbled behind them, yawning. He pushed himself up from among his fishing rods. Don't you ever sleep, Thief Lord? Scipio didn't answer. He strutted like a peacock through the auditorium, while Hornet and Mosca nudged the others awake. I see you've done some cleaning up, Scipio called out. Excellent! The place looked like a pigsty last time. Hi, Ship! Beau scrambled so quickly out of his sleeping bag he nearly fell over his own hands. Barefoot, he ran towards Scipio. Beau was the only one who could call the Thief Lord Ship without getting an icy stare in response. What did you steal this time? He asked excitedly, jumping around Scipio like a puppy. Smiling, the Thief Lord slipped a black sack from his shoulder. Did we check out everything properly this time? Riccio asked humbly, crawling out from underneath his stuffed animals. Come on, tell us. He'll start kissing his boots soon, Hornet grumbled so quietly that only Prosper heard it. I, for one, would be happy enough if the fine gentleman didn't turn up so often in the middle of the night. She frowned at Scipio while she squeezed her spindly legs into her boots. I had to change my plans at short notice, Scipio announced, as they all assembled around him. He threw a folded newspaper towards Riccio. Read, page 4, at the top. Eagerly, Riccio kneeled down on the floor and started leafing through the large pages. Mosca and Prosper leaned over his shoulders. Hornet stood a little way away and played with her braid. Spectacular break-in at the Palazzo Contarini, Riccio read haltingly. Valuable jewelry and various works of art stolen. No trace of the perpetrators. He raised his head in surprise. Contarini? But we watched the Palazzo Pisani. Scipio shrugged. So I changed my mind. The Palazzo Pisani comes later. It won't run away, will it? And the Palazzo Contarini. He dangled the sack in front of Riccio's face. Had a few worthwhile things in it, too. He enjoyed the attentive faces around him for a moment, and then sat down cross-legged in front of the starry curtain. He poured the contents of his sack on the floor in front of him. I've already sold the jewels, he explained as the others stepped forward reverently. I had to pay off a few debts, and I also needed new tools. But here, these are for you. On the floor, sparkling in the dim light, lay a couple of silver spoons, a medallion, a magnifying glass with a silver snake coiled around its handle, and a pair of golden tongs set with tiny precious stones with a handle shaped like a rose. Beau, wide-eyed, leaned over Scipio's haul. Carefully, as if the treasures could crumble in his small hands, he picked up one piece after another, felt it, and put it back. Is it all real? He asked, looking at Scipio. Scipio just nodded. Pleased with himself and the world, he stretched his arms and lay down on his side. So what do you say? Am I the Thief Lord or not? Riccio just nodded dumbfoundedly, and even Hornet couldn't hide the fact she was quite impressed. Boy, one day they are going to catch you, Mosca murmured, staring fascinated at the serpentine magnifying glass. No way. Scipio rolled onto his back and looked up at the ceiling. Although I have to say it was quite a close call this time. The alarm system was not as old-fashioned as I expected, and the lady of the house woke up just as I snatched the medallion from her bedside table. But I was on the roof of the house next door faster than she could climb out of her bed. He winked at Beau, who was leaning against his knee, looking at him, awestruck. What are these for? Hornet asked, holding up the rose tongs. For pulling hair out of your nostrils? No. Scipio pushed himself up and snatched the tongs from her fingers. Those are sugar tongs. How do you know all this stuff? Riccio gave Scipio a look between admiration and envy. You grew up in an orphanage just like me, but the nuns never told me anything about sugar tongs or stuff like that. Well, it's been a while since I ran away from the orphanage, Scipio answered, brushing the dust from his black coat. And furthermore, I don't bury my nose in comics all day. Riccio stared at the floor in embarrassment. Well, I don't only read comics, said Hornet, putting her arm around Riccio's shoulder, and I've never heard of sugar tongs. And even if I had, I wouldn't be stupid enough to get all stuck up about it. Scipio cleared his throat, avoiding Hornet's look. Finally, he said more gently, I didn't mean it, Riccio. You can get through life perfectly well without knowing what sugar tongs are, but I can tell you this little thing is worth quite a bit, so this time you'd better get a decent price from Barbarossa. Understood? Can you also tell us how, then? Mosca exchanged helpless glances with the others. We really tried last time, but he's just too smart for us. They all looked at Scipio remorsefully. Ever since he had become their provider and their leader, it had been their job to turn the loot into money, while he took care of the stealing. Scipio had told them who to go to, but he left the haggling to them. The only person in town who would do business with a gang of kids was Ernesto Barbarossa, a fat man with a red beard. Barbarossa had an antique shop where he sold cheap trash to tourists, but he also did secret deals with more valuable, and usually stolen, items. We're not all cut out for this, Mosca continued. Negotiations and haggling and so on, the Redbeard just takes advantage of us. Scipio frowned while he fiddled with the cord of his sack. Prop can haggle like no one else, Bo suddenly said. When we used to sell things at the flea market, he always put on this stony face and— Shut up, Bo, Prosper interrupted his little brother. His ears had turned bright red. Selling old toys is a little different from all this. He nervously took the medallion out of Bo's hand. What's so different? Scipio scrutinized Prosper's face as if he could read there whether Bo had been right or not. Well, I'd be glad if you dealt with it for us, Prop, Mosca said. Yes, Hornet shuddered. The Redbeard gives me the creeps every time he looks at me with his little piggy eyes. I always think he's secretly laughing at us, or he's going to call the police or something. I can't wait to get out of his shop. Prosper scratched himself behind the ear, still looking embarrassed. If you think so, he said, I can probably haggle pretty well, but Barbarossa is crafty. I was there last time when Mosca sold him the other stuff. Try it. Scipio jumped up and hung the empty sack over his shoulder. I've got to go. I have another appointment to keep tonight, but I'll be back tomorrow. He pulled the mask over his eyes. Sometime in the late afternoon. I want to hear what the Redbeard paid you for those things here. If he offers you— he cast a thoughtful look over his loot. Well, if he offers you less than 200,000 lire, then just bring the stuff back for the time being. 200,000! Riccio's mouth stayed open. These things are definitely worth much more, Prosper insisted. Scipio turned around and just said, probably. He looked quite scary again, with the long black bird nose. The naked lights cast his shadow massively on the movie theater's walls. See you, he said. He turned once more before vanishing through the musty curtain. Do we need a new code word? No. The answer came very quickly and in perfect harmony. Fine. Oh yes, Bo? Scipio turned around again. There's a cardboard box behind the curtain. There are 2 little kittens in there. Someone wanted to drown them in the canal. Look after them, will you? Good night, everybody. Alright, and that is where we're going to stop for today. So we have finally gotten to meet the Thief Lord, the leader of this gang of kids who lives in an abandoned movie theater. And they also included a picture. This is the mask he wears. And I think if I saw somebody wearing that mask, I would be pretty scared of him. Alright, my friends, so we're going to stop there for today. And tomorrow we will pick back up with chapter 5. Alright, bye guys.